Welcome back, everybody. Today we're gonna do the same thing we did the last episode, but for difficulties, right? So we're gonna implement the versioning for difficulties. Again, we have a lot to do. For those who are watching the series, you know what this entails. Let's go. Right, so starting off, open up your difficulty. Let's get our version model. And as always, that's just gonna break a bunch of stuff. One thing that is gonna change is if you think about it, right? If we have a trick and it's pointing to one difficulty, and if we change it, we want to retain the link, we are gonna have a many-to-many relationship between difficulties and tricks now. So what we will have to do is we will have to add a trick difficulty as well, same as we have a trick category. Or although when we're pulling information, it's still as if all the time we're gonna only have one difficulty. Okay, so let's go ahead, add a class trick difficulty. We can go into category difficulty, copy most of this stuff and put it into the trick difficulty. Change the IDs, so difficulty ID, and then difficulty. Cool. So that's our trick difficulty. Let's close the trick category and trick difficulty. I mean, we can trick difficulties. We can actually still call them tricks. I don't think it matters that much. Let's make sure we actually initialize the list though. So, you know, all the cool boys do it. We want to do it too. Let's make sure that on the trick, where we have the difficulty, we can remove that. And let's put in a trick difficulty in here as well. Again, these are going to be trick difficulties, and assign the trick difficulty list to it as well. Okay, let's make sure we open up our app DB context, and in here we will add another one of these. So trick categories, put it below the difficulty, trick difficulty, and trick difficulties, right? Now let's make sure we configure the thing. So put it down here, right? We remove the previous relationship that we had, by the way, in case you didn't notice, right? But trick difficulty and difficulty ID, right? So this is essentially just fixing the bottom layer. The rest of the work will come in the API layer and the, what's called the version migration and the moderation IAM controller. So, I mean, you should already kind of know what this entails. One thing I also wanted to do on the version model, let's just put the default version 1. So this will just make it a little bit easier overall, right? Now, let's go ahead and go through the errors and basically one by one. Let's start with the program CS. Coming to the top here where we have all of these things. Let's go ahead and I will need column select, change these to slug. We will, don't jump about. I just want to make sure that I add IDs on here as well, 2 and 3. I will be setting these active to true as well. And I don't need to set the version anymore either. That's going to default to 1, so that's going to make everything a little bit easier. The version from here, I am going to actually remove both of these. And on this category, what I'm going to do is I'm going to context add and add this category separately because I don't want to assign anything to it from the list, right? I don't want to be picking from it because it's a in moderation process. We'll just leave it separately. We'll exclude it from this category list, right? Now, the next couple of things that we'll need to go through. So the first trick that we're adding here, so trick difficulties. This will be a new list where we will add a new trick difficulty, and the difficulty ID is going to be, I think 1 is for easy. Let's copy it to the next difficulty, and the next one we will say 2 here. And don't duplicate the line. And at the very bottom here as well, let's make sure we put this thing here and the ID that we assign. Let me drop this down to a new line. I'll copy this, put this instead of the ID here, and I think that should be pretty much it for the C. Let me exit column select mode. And next thing on the view models, so let's go into the difficulty view model. Where we select the tricks, we can actually go ahead and select the trick ID. This will actually cause a bunch of errors on the front end. We will go through fixing those as well. I mean, what doesn't cause errors these days? You know, just change one slight thing, everything breaks. Anyway, tricks, trick difficulties. We want to say as a queryable, then let's say select, what do we select? Difficulty ID, and we say first or default. And same as the previous clauses, let's just grab this where active and put this here, right? We will have to assign this to a difficulty. Let's make sure we copy this, and anywhere where we need a difficulty, we will put it. One place that we're not going to put it is on this flat one, flat projection. Let's not put it there. The other one, yeah, let's full projection, user projection, and projection. Let's put it all there except the flat projection, right? Next part are the controllers. So let's go to the difficulty controller first, close everything else. On here, the get, what we want to do is same thing we did previously, where we can either get by ID or a slug, right? So ID or slug, let's put value here, first or default. We can go ahead and emit it, and what we want to do is we want to select to a difficulty view models and projection. Let's just double check the projection that we got everything we want here, and I think, yeah, looks okay to me. Convert it to object. Cool. List difficulty tricks. I don't think we are actually using this endpoint, so I think it's safe to delete it. We're not using that endpoint because when we list the difficulties for a trick, we're doing that from memory, okay? So this thing right here, when we create it, as you know, this is gonna fundamentally change. Let's go ahead and separate this out a little bit. Difficulty. Put this difficulty here. The thing that we're assigning here is the slug. We no longer need to set the version. User ID, we will set user ID. We don't have the user ID. Pop to the top, API controller, inherit from it. Right here, all the way down. And after we save changes, let's just make sure we context add a new moderation item like that. Target will be difficulty ID, user ID, make sure we set user ID, and type, what's it called, moderation types, we want one new one, difficulty, say difficulty, right? I think that's okay. Let's set difficulty on here. Cool. Close that off. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything. Let's just quickly take a look at it. Name, description. Okay, yeah. So the rest of it looks fine. Let's go into the tricks controller and let's look at this thing. So when we add a new trick, this thing will have to come from the form. So let's just make sure that we set an integer here. And trick difficulties are now going to be a new list. There is going to be a new trick difficulty in here, and the difficulty ID is going to be this thing here. Okay, there we go. And again, I'm just gonna copy this thing and put it at the error here as well. And that is pretty much it for fixing up errors. Let's go ahead and work on the version migration context now. So going into the data layer version migration context, one clause to add here on for the difficulty, and then we want a difficulty migration context. Let's go ahead, generate the type. We are just going to implement missing members, and let's just move the type out. So for the constructor, just create a field dude. For the source, let's return context difficulties. And for migrating the relationships, this is going to look more or less like the category migration context. So we can just copy this whole thing here, come back here and put it here. So instead, we're going to trick difficulties. We are going to be looking at the difficulty ID. And then we're going to be adding a trick difficulty instead. And again, this is going to be difficulty ID, and this is pretty much it here. Now, one thing that I've missed out on the previous episode and I actually needed to fix is to fix the tricks migration context, because now the version, if we change a trick, we will need to bump all the targets for categories and difficulties as well. So here what I'm gonna do is instead is get the current trick, and we're gonna go into the context tricks, and we're gonna include a bunch of stuff here. So we're gonna say trick difficulties, categories, get the prerequisites and progressions, and then we're gonna say first our default, where not this clause actually, let's just compare ID to current. Okay, let's delete this, and then we basically want a bunch of for each loops where we're gonna have current trick, let's say difficulties, so we'll say difficulty. Let's remove this thing here because not a big change. We're just setting these to false, right? We're gonna copy this a couple of times. This is gonna change to categories. This is going to be a category. Change this to progressions. Maybe, yeah, whatever. Progression, right? Prerequisites, and change this to prerequisite. Yeah, just make sure you rename the last bit as well. And for the other bit right here, we pretty much do the same thing, except for here we supply a target, and then instead of current trick, we say target trick. Make sure we replace all of these occurrences and set all of these to true. Okay, so this is what the migration relationship is gonna look like for our tricks. I think more or less fine at this point. Did we add this thing? Yep. So that's fine. Let's go ahead, close it, everything. And one thing I remembered about relationships, if we go into a program where we create all of our relationships and stuff like that, so this type of stuff, they have the active property, and basically what I want to do is to set all of these actives to true wherever we do set these. So let's start at the top. For me, it's like line 82 when we add the first trick. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say active or inside the object here. I appreciate this could be a little bit like, because it's on the edge of the screen, but I'm just setting all relationships to true where they need to be. So you know, so correct data is going to be returned, because on the view model we have the where clause to retrieve only the active things. That is the primary reason that I'm changing it. Next thing is when I add a bunch of these tricks and categories, and that should be it. Now, closing this, let's go into our moderation item controller. And here where we have the if statements, you guessed it, let's go ahead and add another one for the difficulty, and this is going to be coming from difficulties. Let's just change this T to category, this T to difficulty. This is going to be a difficulty. On the create flat here, difficulty view models. View models, let's go in here, copy this thing, create a flat. I mean, pretty much same spiel, but for a different entity, right? Projection, flat, projection flat, create flat. There we go, moderation item, create flat. It works. One important thing when testing, category ID and difficulty ID and trick ID, they can overlap. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna change this back to string, and we're gonna prefix these with the moderation types, right? So we're gonna do something along the lines of this. All right, so just put the type before the ID, and then that's where we're throwing in the mapping. So let me actually throw this down here. And then once we do go to retrieve this, what we can do is we can check, we can take the type, and we can again reconcatenate it here, and you know, have our target object in the end as well. Now the last couple of things that we can actually take care of as well are forms. So where we have the create category. Wait, what am I doing in the category? Difficulty form. Let's rename it to create a difficulty form. We can then create a derived type. We don't need the implementation. We can rename this to update difficulty, and again the prop is just going to be integer ID right here. And let's go ahead and move this out into its own file like that. And I saw the implementation there. I just want to make sure that on the update category form I don't have that implementation there as well. Okay, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and validation. I remember create category form validation. I just didn't have create on here, so just, you know, being consistent. What are you gonna do, arrest me? This one, create a difficulty form validation. Let's go ahead, give this a copy. Create, we can select next occurrence and update difficulty form. Same thing, we can say ID greater than 0. Update difficulty form. Did we update difficulty form? That should have no problem finding it. What's the problem? Inconsistent accessibility. Okay, so we didn't put public on here. That is fine, so make sure that's public. Take this out into its own file, and there we go. Right, so now that we got the update form and renamed a bunch of stuff, we can go back into the difficulty controller. Let's go ahead and copy this controller. Copy this action, and let's just create the put action. We can call update here, update difficulty form, and again let's just call this new difficulty. So new difficulty that we grab here is going to come from the context. So difficulties, first our default, let's say ID equals form ID. If difficulty is null, return no content. Right, same stuff. On the new difficulty, we can go ahead, put this here. Version will be difficulty version +1. And let's see, what else do we want? When we create the moderation item current, we want new difficulty ID on here. Okay, or actually this is going to be the other way around, isn't it? So current and then target's going to be here. Swap these around and that should be good to go. So once we got this bit, let's go ahead and collapse all of this stuff, and let's go ahead and check out the stuff on the front end, right? So what do we actually need to do? Let's go ahead and go into our moderation difficulty overview, and this is where we need to bind the action. So we can actually grab the one from the category overview. So all these methods, that's all going to pretty much look the same. The only difference is that we are going to be passing difficulty here. The component is going to be the difficulty form. So let's just make sure we call it that as well. And that we pass the difficulty. When we actually edit, let's go ahead and pass the difficulty in here as well. Now going to the actual difficulty form and opening up the category form as well, because most of the stuff is going to be pretty much the same. Let's just copy this computer property, put it on the end here. In the created clause, that is going to be the same as well. The other thing that we will need is this form ID. If we got it, do the put, otherwise do the post. Let's duplicate this. Let's just change the put here. And I think that should be relatively it towards this bit here. Let's go ahead and open up our moderation ID item. Let's put the difficulty clause here on the item component. Again, a simple info card. Difficulty. As I said, we're going to reuse that component for these two. I would say it's not preferable, but due to time constraints, I would be inclined to say go for it, right? If you want to separate it out, go for it. This difficulties, there we go. Let's go ahead, close everything. One important thing, or actually there are two important things. During testing, let's go into moderation item feed. The problem that I arrived here is, again, the IDs overlapping. So the keys that we had here, they would override each other. So let's go ahead and just put a more or less good looking key on the moderation item feed items. So let's see, moderation item, we'll put the ID, and then we want to put the type as well. So that was the first one. The next one was if we Control-Shift-F and we look for, again, the same occurrences of difficulty.id, wherever we've been using ID, let's try to find in the directory and swap it to slug, because we made that difference now as well. So here, let's go ahead, say slug on the keys. We can skip the keys. Next thing where we have the route, let's say slug. Here have slug as well. And again, DID, we were doing that anywhere. I don't think, nope, that's not it. Okay, so that is fine. Let's go ahead and actually, because we did this previously in the difficulty view models, yeah, let's just make sure that we include the slug and the version. Let's go ahead and put it down here as well. Okay, so, you know, we actually get the data. All right, let's check it out. Let's see if it works. One thing, again, difficulty controller. When we do get all of our stuff, let's just verify that it is not deleted. We don't actually delete anything. It's maybe something that we need to implement, but yeah, let's get all the active ones here. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a refresh. So this thing is going to be broken. We are going to fix that in a minute. Let's go ahead and just first test the moderation creation process and stuff like that. So on the moderation here, if we have the difficulties, we can try to go ahead and edit one. Okay. First, let's go ahead and create a difficulty. Test 1, create. We'll create it. If we take a look at it here, it should be here. So that's new. It shouldn't be popping up down here. If we go to the moderation, we go to, oh, we don't want to do that. We want to go to, and we want to say hardy, create. We should intermit those, but again, I'll save it for later because we are doing quite a bit here already. And that's the change. Okay, so let's just double check that there are no errors in the console or anything like that. Let's go ahead and approve this, and holy moly, let's refresh this. And okay, so this is hardy, and that's okay. The reason we don't have submissions is a different reason, but let's go ahead and fix the submissions on the front end. So this is something, if we go to the category view models, why do they display and the other ones don't? Is because when we get the projection for the category, we are getting the slugs. So what I want to do is I actually want to switch this to trick ID, because on the difficulty view models, when we get this we're going to get trick IDs. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to go from trick IDs into slugs, because on our submissions they point to slugs because they want to be version agnostic. Okay, so once all of our categories and difficulties include the trick IDs rather than the slugs, this is where we can go and front page category and difficulty. Let's open up both of these. And on the page difficulty, what we're going to do is, if we have tricks, what we should do is grab these tricks. So difficulty, tricks, and we will map. So these are IDs, and we should grab these from dictionary. So we're gonna have a dictionary, this dictionary, tricks, grab the particular trick and grab the slug. So these are going to be slugs. So the thing that we do here is we supply a trick slug, and then we just do, actually, let's just say tricks, reduce. And do we really need to do that here? Let's just take this and we'll put it here, and we can pop these down here like this and say tricks. Okay, and probably let's just call it by tricks, and we'll supply by tricks here. Okay, remove that function up top, and what this should do now is for all the IDs that we have, grab the trick slugs and reduce them together. Okay, now you will see that the difficulties have submissions and the other ones don't. So let's go ahead and apply the same change. So let's just copy this, go to the category. In the function that we have here, if we do have tricks, we want to grab it from the category. The other clause, that's going to be the same. By tricks, let's just make sure that we supply this here. The function itself, we can go ahead and remove it. Okay. So with this change, we should now have categories that are actually pointing to submissions, unless we've broken everything, because we don't have the dictionary. So let's go ahead and surface the dictionary here, and there we go. So a couple of other things that are broken are they broken? If we go to the trick itself, looks to be working. So the list works here. The list on the difficulty doesn't work. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the difficulty. Where we have the tricks, we are taking a look at the lists. We are getting this very awkwardly. We should be getting it the way that we're getting it in the category as well. So yeah, let's just copy all of this. We'll put it here, and we'll just, again, difficulty slug. We already kind of solved this problem. It's not bad if you copy, right? Like copying code. Hopefully I don't need to be saying this because what's it called? Copying code is like essential. It's essential to your survival. All right, so get the difficulty from the route. It's going to be the slug. We then, in the dictionary, we want to go to all the difficulties. We want to find all the difficulties, or rather the specific difficulty by the slug. We want to see its trick, and then from the dictionary again, we want to select these tricks, right? Yeah, the rest looks fine. Let's go ahead and give this a refresh. And there we go. So we should get all the tricks in the medium clause. Just look at the medium clause again and the kick clause. So yep, or that was the kick category. Let's see, easy. Yep. So more or less working the same. Hard. Yep. So that navigation is working. Transition is working. A lot of stuff is working. Do not get fooled. Still a lot of stuff is broken, and we're going to fix that in the next episode. But for now, this will be it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section. I stream on Wednesdays and Sundays, so make sure to join my Discord server if you want to know when I start the stream. And as always, I'll see you in the next episode.